Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are unpacking a really specific kind of modern paradox.
Right, the independence trap, basically.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's this situation that I think a lot of you listening have probably found yourselves in, or at least aspired to reach at some
Oh,
point.
absolutely.
You know, you spend years, maybe even decades, doing the work. You go to therapy, you build the career, you curate your apartment, you cultivate this really deep sense of self-love.
Hmm.
You essentially build this fortress of well-being where you are genuinely perfectly fine on your own.
Yeah, you reached the summit of the mountain, you've
Yeah.
achieved independence.
Exactly. You plant your flag, but then standing on that summit, you look around at the view and you realize you still kind of want someone standing next to you.
Yeah.
And for the hyper-independent person, that desire can feel like a total betrayal.
Mm.
It brings up this nagging question like, if I'm so whole, if I'm so complete, why do I still have this ache? Like, did I fail at being independent?
It's a brutal internal critique, it really is.
Mm.
Because we've swung the cultural pendulum so hard away from codependency that we've almost pathologized the natural human desire for connection.
All right.
We start thinking that the goal of therapy or self-improvement is to need nothing. But the source material we're looking at today argues that the goal isn't to need nothing, it's to need differently.
And that distinction, needing nothing versus needing differently, is the absolute core of what we're exploring today. We're looking at this really nuanced, very reflective piece titled, When You're Content and Still Want Someone to Share It With.
It's beautifully written.
It is. It's this blend of personal memoir, attachment theory, and what the author calls timeless wisdom, drawing quite a bit on Dharma and spiritual
Yeah,
practice.
it bridges psychology and philosophy really well.
And our mission for this deep dive is to figure out what love actually looks like when it's not coming from a place of, I'm broken, fix me, but rather from a place of, I'm whole, witness me.
Witness me.
Mm.
That is a very different request than save me.
So different.
And I think to understand that shift, we have to look at how the author describes their life before romance even enters the picture.
Mm.
Because they aren't describing a life of desperation.
No, not at all. They describe their current life as peaceful.
Mm-hmm.
And I really appreciate that they don't use the word perfect. They talk about having enough.
Yes.
Enough comfort, enough purpose, enough quiet. It's a life built on the other side of trauma, actually. They mention learning from what didn't work in the past, establishing boundaries, and integrating their sharp edges.
Right, which means this is someone who has done the heavy lifting to become a solid container for themselves.
Mm.
They've moved out of that chaotic phase of life where you're just looking for external validation to stabilize you.
Mm-hmm.
They own their home, they have intentional friendships. The solitude they have isn't a void they're trying to escape, it's a place of rest.
And this is the crucial pivot point in the piece.
Mm.
The author admits that despite this incredibly solid foundation, there is still an ache, a specific type of loneliness.
And it's not the loneliness of emptiness. It's not, I'm bored or I'm sad.
Right? They use this incredible phrase. They call it abundance without witness.
That phrase does so much heavy lifting. Abundance without witness.
It reminds me of that old philosophical question, right? If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it make a sound?
Yeah.
The author is essentially asking, if I have this beautiful life, the light hitting the table just right, the perfect cup of coffee, the huge professional win, but no one is there to see it, does it resonate as fully?
Psychologically speaking, the answer is usually no. This is entirely about the mechanism of shared reality. Our nervous systems are literally designed to co-regulate and to validate experiences through others.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, when you see something beautiful, your first instinct is almost always to point at it and show someone else. Why? Because the shared experience amplifies the reality of it. The source actually uses a great analogy about music here.
Right. They say joy is like music. You can listen to a symphony on your own headphones, and it's technically the exact same audio file. It's beautiful.
What?
But sitting in a concert hall, turning to the person next to you when that huge crescendo hits, that vibration is entirely different.
Exactly. It grounds the experience in reality. The author describes these specific evenings where the light settles across the table. The silence is welcome, but it creates a space where they imagine another heartbeat in the room.
It's such a visceral image.
It is. And I want to be super clear about the biology here. This isn't a panic response. It's not the anxious attachment style screaming, don't leave me. It's a calm, steady hum, a desire for resonance.
So if it's not panic and it's not codependency, Why on earth do we feel so guilty about it? Why do we judge ourselves for wanting that heartbeat?
Well, the source tackles this head on. They call it the lie of independence.
Yes, the lie we've all been sold. And I think this is where a lot of us get completely tripped up. We treat independence as the final boss level of adulthood.
We really do. It's the fortress mentality. We are sold this narrative that if you are truly strong, you are self-contained, you are an island, you need absolutely no one.
But the source, and they reference both the Buddha and modern psychology here,
Yeah.
argues that this is a complete delusion. They introduce this concept of interdependence instead.
Which is a term that gets thrown around a lot in, like, corporate team building.
Oh, yeah, constantly.
But here it feels so much more intimate. The author uses the metaphor of a tree to explain it.
Let's dig into that tree metaphor because it's so good.
Yeah, think about the structural risk a tree actually takes. A tree is a distinct entity. It has its own trunk, its own bark, its own immune system. So it is technically independent in its identity.
Okay.
But it is structurally reliant on the soil, the water, the light. It leans on its environment. If a tree decided to be independent in the way we tell humans to be independent, it would seal off its roots. It would become completely impermeable, and then it would die.
That is the absolute key right there. Permeability.
Hmm.
The author writes this beautiful definition of mature love. They say it's knowing yourself deeply enough to share that self without losing it.
Yes.
The quote that really stuck with me was, I know where I end and where you begin, and still I choose to reach across.
That is the perfect definition of interdependence. Knowing where I end is the boundary work. That's the independence you fought for. Choosing to reach across is the vulnerability.
It's choosing to risk it.
Exactly. It's saying, I could survive without you, but I will thrive better in harmony with you. It's a huge risk because once you reach across, you are letting something in that you cannot control.
And that loss of control is terrifying for the hyper-independent person.
Yeah.
We much prefer the control of the fortress to the risk of the bridge.
Precisely. But the source argues that the fortress ultimately becomes a prison. The maturity is in lowering the drawbridge, not because you have to, but because you want to.
Okay, so let's say we lower the drawbridge. We decide we actually want this interdependence. The metric for who we let in has to change, right?
Completely.
Because if I don't need you to pay my rent, and I don't need you to be my therapist, and I don't need you to give me an identity, what exactly is the job description?
Well, the job description shifts from what I need from love to what I can offer to it. It shifts from savior to witness.
That's my absolute favorite line from the piece. I don't seek rescue, I seek resonance.
It's so powerful.
Let's unpack resonance. Because that word feels like it belongs in a physics classroom, but it's actually a perfect description for this kind of connection.
It is. Think about two tuning forks. When one vibrates, if the other is tuned to the same frequency, it starts to vibrate too without even touching. That is resonance.
I love that.
It's not about someone coming in and fixing your broken parts. It's about someone whose presence amplifies your own frequency.
And the source specifically contrasts this with the rescue dynamic. In a rescue dynamic, you are drowning and you need a lifeguard. The power dynamic is inherently unequal from the start.
Right. And rescue is always based on lack. I lack safety, so I need you to be my shield. Resonance is based on abundance. I have safety, and I want you to share it.
So what does a whole person actually look for? The author gives us a specific wish list for this resonance candidate.
And it's a fascinatingly simple but high-stakes list. They look for presence, someone who is steady, unpretentious, awake.
They mention emotional balance, too. Someone who has done their own work. That really stood out to me.
Me too. This isn't asking for a perfect human being. It's asking for someone who knows their own demons well enough not to project them onto you.
Exactly. It's the difference between I'm acting out my trauma on you and I'm sharing my history with you.
Yes. If you've done the work to become whole, you cannot be with someone who needs you to be their parent. You need a peer.
They also list the curiosity to grow, and the patience to stay.
Which are vital.
But here is the pushback I hear all the time from friends who have finally gotten to a healthy place. They meet someone who fits this wish list, someone stable, kind, emotionally balanced, and they say, it's boring.
Ugh, the boring myth.
They say there's no spark, there's no fireworks. Is resonance just a fancy word for settling?
No, absolutely not. And this is where we really have to look at neurochemistry. If you are used to chaotic relationships, passion feels like anxiety.
Oh, that's so true.
It feels like a massive spike of cortisol and adrenaline. The will they or won't they, the extreme highs and lows, that creates a literal dopamine loop in your brain. It's addictive.
So when you meet someone who is consistent, who texts back when they say they will, who is just steadily there, your nervous system doesn't get that spike.
Correct. And if you mistake that adrenaline spike for love, then stability is going to feel like boredom. But the source reframes this beautifully. They argue that stability with the right person isn't dull, it is luminous.
Luminous, I love that word choice. It suggests a steady, warm light rather than a blinding flashbang.
The author writes that kindness is the true solvent of connection. It completely outweighs that initial chaotic spark. The flashbang burns out, the steady light allows you to actually see each other.
And that leads right into the ultimate purpose of this kind of relationship.
Mm.
Because if you don't need someone to complete you, why bother? If it's not for rescue, what's it for?
The source's answer is shared evolution.
Shared evolution. The idea that relationships are a mirror. We don't meet to be completed, we meet to evolve.
Yes, because no matter how much therapy you do, you cannot see the back of your own head. You need a mirror.
That's a great point.
A partner who acts as a mirror, not a funhouse mirror that distorts you, but a clear, honest mirror that shows you who you are becoming, is completely invaluable.
It's co-creation. The text mentions this really tender idea of calling each other back to kindness.
Yeah.
I imagine a scenario where you're stressed, you're snapping, you're reverting to old defensive patterns.
We all do it.
Right. And a rescue partner might crumble, or they might fight back aggressively. But a resonant partner holds the line and says, hey, that's not who you are. Come back.
That is compassion in practice. It's the function of love in a whole relationship. It's less about the passion that burns and much more about the warmth that endures.
It's the willingness to stay curious about who the other person is becoming.
It's a mechanism for recalibration. It helps you stay the person you want to be, even when you're too tired to do it alone.
Okay, so we have the philosophy down. We know we want resonance, not rescue.
Mm-hmm.
We know we want a mirror, not a savior. But let's get super practical for a minute. How do you actually date with this mindset?
It's tough out there.
Because the modern dating landscape, the apps, the ghosting, the paradox of choice, it feels specifically designed to erode your wholeness.
It is a gauntlet, truly. And this is where the source shifts into what I think is the most actionable part of the text, the practice of dating whole. And it's not just be yourself. It's a rigorous discipline of living fully while looking.
Taking classes, walking with friends, letting curiosity lead your life rather than desperation.
Exactly. And the first concrete tool they mention is the question shift. Instead of going on a date and asking, is this the one, which puts so much pressure on a simple cup of coffee,
So much pressure.
you ask, what is this connection here to show me?
Treating every single encounter as a teacher. That shift turns every date from a potential failure into a guaranteed lesson.
It really does.
If you go on a date and the person is rude to the waiter and you feel that familiar old urge to shrink or to people pleaser, the lesson isn't, I'll never find love. The lesson is, oh, look at that. I still have a reflex to fawn when someone is aggressive. Let me work on that. The date just becomes data.
That takes all the power back. You aren't auditioning for them anymore. You're observing yourself.
But let's talk about the specific friction of grasping. You meet someone you actually like. You feel that resonance we talked about. The absolute instinct, even for the highly independent person, is to grab on tight, to check the phone every 5 minutes.
Oh, the phone check-in, we all know it.
How do you practice wholeness in that specific moment of vulnerability?
This is where the concept of secure attachment stops being just a psychological theory and becomes a daily somatic practice. The source explicitly describes it as a calm willingness to engage without losing your balance.
They say, reach without fear, give without grasping. Which sounds incredibly poetic, but what does that actually feel like in the body?
It feels like an open hand instead of a clenched fist. Grasping comes from a place of scarcity. It's the thought, if I don't hold on to this tightly, it will leave.
Right.
Secure attachment acknowledges, I would love for this to stay, but I will be fundamentally okay if it goes.
So practically speaking, when you're dealing with digital life, you send a text and they don't reply for 3 hours.
The grasping mind starts spinning stories immediately. They lost interest. I said too much. I need to send another text to fix it.
Panic mode.
Exactly. But the whole mind notices the anxiety, feels it, but doesn't act on it. You let the silence exist. You let the messages unfold at what the author calls a human pace.
A human pace. That is so contrary to the digital pace we're used to on dating apps.
It really is. But the author argues that showing up without performing is key. Sincerity still speaks louder than the scroll. If you show up without the performance, without that frantic pick-me energy, you signal safety.
You signal that you are a solid container.
And interestingly enough, that tends to attract other solid
You
containers.
essentially filter out the people who need chaos. If you don't play the game, the people who only know how to play games will get bored and leave.
And that is a good thing. That is the trash taking itself out, honestly.
Let's touch on how this approach changes the timeline of love. Because the author talks about having a faith in ripening.
Yes.
There is this massive cultural pressure that says love has an expiration date. If you haven't found it by 30 or 40, the stock is plummeting.
Which is a narrative entirely designed to sell anti-aging cream and desperation. The source offers a complete reframe. They suggest that this isn't naive hope. It is a faith in ripening. Love doesn't shrink with age.
It becomes less spectacle and more sincerity.
Exactly. A quiet brilliance that endures because it no longer needs to prove itself to anyone. That's a really powerful idea, that the love you find at 40 or 50 might actually be better quality than the love you found at 20 because you are a better quality person.
You're bringing a fully formed self to the table. The waiting period isn't lost time, it's preparation. You are becoming capable of a depth of love that your younger self simply couldn't handle.
And the ultimate goal described here is peace in motion. It's a love that unleashes you, it doesn't limit you. It sees life as a shared horizon, not a role you have to perform.
That is a beautiful vision for what relationship can be. But the text does end with this really striking, almost provocative warning. They say, may we never mistake wholeness for closure.
That is the ultimate trap of the hyper-independent person. You get so good at being alone, so perfectly efficient that you accidentally seal the hatch. You weld the door shut.
I don't need anyone. Becomes, I won't let anyone in.
And that's not wholeness, that's just isolation with better furniture.
Right. The goal is to keep the door unlocked, to keep your heart genuinely curious. The author's final blessing is the idea that if love arrives, it sees you were ready long before it got there.
Not because you were sitting around waiting for it, but because you were out living a full life.
You weren't frantically prepping the guest room. You were just keeping a beautiful house for yourself.
Exactly. And that shift from waiting to living is what turns the ache we talked about earlier from a painful thing into just another beautiful texture of a full life.
It changes the entire texture of your day-to-day. You stop scanning every room you walk into for a potential partner, and you start actually just being in the room.
And ironically, that presence is exactly what makes you most likely to truly connect with someone.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a thought experiment based on this exact distinction between wholeness and closure.
Okay.
We so often ask ourselves, am I ready to be loved? Which usually secretly implies, am I good enough yet?
But the source suggests a much more challenging question for us to ponder.
Right. If you accepted, truly accepted, that your independence is not a barrier to love, but actually the prerequisite for the absolute best kind of love.
Yeah,
What armor are you still wearing that you could take off today?
it's a great question.
Are you keeping your heart curious? What is one way you can choose to reach across this week? Not to get something, not to be rescued, but just to practice the permeability of that tree.
That is the daily practice right there.
Well, thank you for unpacking this with me. It's a dense topic, but a truly vital one.
My pleasure. It's always good to check our foundations.
Indeed. We'll see you all in the next deep dive. Keep the door unlocked.